This recording is intended to help Newark Charter High School students and parents understand the process for applying to college from Newark Charter. There's a lot of different procedures involved here, so it's easy to get kind of sidetracked going one direction over another, but I want to try to kind of follow a high-level overview of the general process of applying to colleges from Newark Charter. The first step should be to go to the Newark Charter website to see this overview because it'll be there as well. So from the Newark Charter homepage, you can simply go to the top. You can hover, click on junior, senior high school, or you can go to schools here and then go to junior, senior high school, college and school counseling. Once you click there, give it a minute to load. And then you're going to click on college application process for seniors. Now, if you want to skip the process of the multiple clicks there it took to get to that page, you can simply go to this website here, which is a URL shortener, tinyurl.com/NCS college apps. It's not case sensitive. I just use that there to make it easier to read. But that website there will essentially take you to this site here. And feel free to pause the video at any points if you want to go back and review things that I've discussed. So this website will stay live. Students can see it, parents can see it from home. You don't have to log in anywhere to view it. But it addresses the 5 key procedures that we need students to follow to ensure that their application can be processed correctly. And it's important that students follow those instructions and, of course, meet deadlines because this is a pretty mammoth undertaking that both students and counselors and teachers and parents are all involved with to make sure this process gets off the ground. So at the very front here, it lists the 5 steps. So they essentially entail sending official test scores, SAT or subject tests or the ACT, whatever's required, by the college, that is. Number 2, bring home the transcript release form, obtain parent signature, and return to the bin at the main office. Number 3, create a common application account. And then there's a couple steps there that we'll go over. Number 4, complete the paper transcript request form, 1 for each college. Then number 5, in addition to completing a paper transcript request form, you'll be requesting transcripts for specific colleges actually through Navient. Now I just want to go back to the top of this here, see where it says number 1, send official test scores. We put that number 1 to make sure students are aware of the fact that students are responsible for sending their own test scores officially if a college requires a test score at all, which we'll talk about more in a little bit. But it's not necessarily the number 1 thing you have to do. We just put it as number 1 because there's so many students that might forget this process. They've applied, they've completed their essay, the transcript was sent, the recommendations were sent, everything was done correctly, and then all of a sudden they realized they forgot to send the test score. Some high schools, it seems to be fewer and fewer now, given privacy laws, actually will list the SAT score on the transcript. Newark Charter will never do that because we think it's important for students to own their own test scores. So if a school requires test scores, typically they'll require them to be sent through the College Board, and that'll be covered in this tutorial briefly. But it's not necessarily the first thing you have to do is sending test scores. We just want you to be aware of that. But where we really want students to start ultimately is number 2 and number 3. So let's take you through those. Now again, this tutorial has the overview up top, but as you scroll down, you can see each of the 5 steps has more information that's covered. So let's just start quickly with sending test scores. Now again, this has to be done ideally weeks before the deadline of the college because it will take a little while to get there, much longer than you think. It's not as immediate. You'd think it would be a click and a send, and a college would have it and download it and match with the application. Often the sending takes a while, and then the matching with the application takes even longer. So let's click on that, and then it'll expand. So you have to log into the College Board or ACT account to send the score officially. And we say here, you should send it at least 1 full month prior to the deadline, whenever possible. Now, it could be a case where you're taking a test less than a month before the deadline, so it might get there later, and that's okay. In many cases, just do your research to ensure that that's all right. What you don't want is to have an application submitted for a November 1 deadline, and then your test score is not getting there until sometime in December, That's way too late. So ultimately, you want to make sure your test score is getting there before that deadline. Now, there are some instances where it's okay for it to come a little bit afterward, but that's a case where a student would want to make sure to check in with the college counselor. You can check in with me, or you can check in with Mrs. Halfin to make sure that we have that squared away. This next piece is really important for the University of Delaware. The University of Delaware has what's considered a test optional policy for Delawareans only. And so they're recommending that if you have an 1150 or above on the SAT or an ACT of 23 or higher, that you should submit the score officially to UD for review. So if that's the case, you want to make sure to list in your Common App your test score, and then also to send the test score officially. So you send it through the College Board. You also self-report the test score on your application in the Common App. Now, this next piece is the key. If you did not score an 1150 or higher on the SAT, and 1150 is a pretty solid score, that's a pretty high score, or if you didn't score a 23 or higher on the ACT, then the University of Delaware doesn't require you to send that score. You should not send it officially, so don't go through College Board and send it to UD. And also, do not self-report the score in your Common App. So where it allows you to list your test score in Common App, you want to leave that blank when you're applying to UD if you haven't earned an 1150 or higher on the SAT or a 23 or higher on the ACT. So you're selecting to not have the test score considered, thereby applying test optional. Now, it's important to note that if you apply test optional, so you don't have a score 1150 or higher, and you have not achieved particularly well academically, then they're going to have a tough time admitting you. What they're looking for with test optional applicants is a number of things, but ultimately they want students who, even if their test scores, their SAT or ACT, are not demonstrating tremendously high aptitude on that level, they realize that many high achieving students who work hard, who get the job done, and have a big time propensity for success can still succeed without having a high test score. So Newark Charter and other high schools have had plenty of students succeed with test optional applications applying to UD without sending a test score, but you have to have taken advantage of the educational opportunities at your high school. So in our case at Newark Charter, there's quite a bit to take advantage of. That includes clubs, activities, engagement with sports, trying to take advantage of any leadership opportunities or volunteering opportunities that came your way. And then, of course, succeeding in the classroom as well is going to be a big part of that. So it's going to be tough for the University of Delaware to admit you without seeing the test score achievement if they don't also see educational success in the classroom and even things beyond that, like extracurricular engagement with the school or the community, et cetera. So it's not like test optional is your backdoor into UD. In fact, many test optional admits from Newark Charter thus far have been really high achieving students whose test scores might not have been there, but their grades were strong and they had shown a real work ethic that was easily demonstrated on their application. But once you decided whether or not you have to send the test score, and again, we talk a lot about University of Delaware because it's so close and it is the flagship state university, and because they're unique in having this test optional policy. But in general, you'll be sending your test score, you could be sending it to any number of schools, not just University of Delaware. So the process for sending the test score is shown down here. You'll be logging into your College Board account. And if you have difficulty logging in, which is pretty typical, feel free to call this number. Listen to the prompts, explain your problem, and they'll help you find a way to make sure you can log in and send the score. And once you're logged in, you want to look for something where it says send available scores. Then you're going to search for the colleges that you want to receive it and make sure you're sending it to the right college. You don't want to simply send it. It's very easy to send it to the wrong University of California school, for example. So make sure to send it to the right school. And then scroll down where it says sending AP scores. It's important to note, we emphasize the sending of SAT or ACT through your account. However, for AP scores, advanced placement class scores on the exams, you should be self-reporting them on the Common App, and that's an optional action. You don't have to do that, self-reporting the AP scores, but many students will. If they feel that they've succeeded in those AP classes and on those exams, they will self-report on the Common App. But you should not officially send scores via College Board account until admitted to enroll at a particular college. And you can do that in the summer or in the spring prior to enrolling. So a lot of students think, oh, I have to send my SAT score officially. I should go ahead and pay to send my AP scores officially. That's a waste of money because almost every college in the country does not require the official score report. They'll be okay with the self-reported scores. Of course, they'll verify later when you send them. But during the process of applying to colleges, you should not officially pay to send the AP scores, but instead self-report them on the application if you think the score is a good reflection of your success on that test. So that was step one, was sending scores. Now that doesn't have to happen right away, but it should happen long before the deadline. We say at least a month to ensure it gets there. And again, if you have an application that's due November 1, but you have a test that's close to that time frame, many cases you can go to the college's website and check to see what's the last testing date they'll allow a student to take to be considered for a particular deadline. And you might find it's okay to do it within less than a month in many cases, but just to be safe, we recommend that month time in between. The second step of the 5 key procedures is the transcript release form. We'll be handing this out to all students during a meeting in September, to all seniors. And essentially, you're going to be signing this form. It'll be in a blue piece of paper. So the parent needs to sign this. And what this does is allows Newark Charter to send documents to colleges that the student lets us know after this form is submitted. Otherwise, this form would be required for every college. So once a parent submits this, they're basically saying, we give the school permission to send their students documents, which is going to be letters of recommendation and transcripts and the school profile to the college. If you only want it to go to one college in particular, you can indicate that here, number 1. But we prefer that students check off number 2, which allows us to send the documentation to any school that the student thereafter asks us to send it to. So this doesn't tell us we can send it anywhere we want. This is just a way of ensuring that we know from here on out, when your student requests to apply somewhere, they no longer require a parent signature. Now they're still going to have to request that the documents be sent, but this is a catch-all at the front end to ensure that they're not often seeking out a parent signature last minute or anything. So this is on the front end to ensure we can send documents out to colleges, and it's called a transcript release form. It'll be blue, and students will be taking that home in September for parent signature. So we really want that to come home, and as soon as it's home, it comes back right to school the next day, because it's easy to forget these things, and we will not send documents out unless we have this back. It'll probably be one of the only blue forms students are taking home, so you can ask your student, where's the blue sheet, if you haven't seen it. The next step, and this is where it gets a little bit more involved, so the student needs to be fully engaged in this, is to create a Common App account and to match with Navient. Now, the Common App account is required for the University of Delaware because that's the only application system they currently use. If you are a student, or if you're a parent of a student who is not applying to the University of Delaware, it's possible that you might not need the Common Application at all, but because so many dozens and hundreds of colleges use it, we really want all students to at least get this element started. If they don't end up applying to any school with Common App and they have an account out there, it's not going to hurt them. So it's a good process just to get done in case they end up using Common App. And because, probably 85, 90%, maybe more of the senior class will apply to the University of Delaware for a number of reasons, we do talk a lot about Common App. And so the next section will be regarding Common Application. So there's a lot that has to be done in the Common Application. Overall, the Common App itself is not particularly challenging. It's the essays that take the most time. But in order for the Newark Charter counseling staff to be able to send documents, including transcripts and letters of recommendation, to colleges, students have to essentially sync up their Common App account with Navient, and we call that matching. So before you can match with their Navient account, the student has to create a Common App account. So we say you must use your Newark Charter email. We just recommend that. It's not actually a must. We just strongly encourage it because we know that your Navient account is linked to your Newark Charter email. So it makes it a little easier if that's the account you use. But ultimately, you want to create a Common App account. Ideally, you're using your Newark Charter email. But if you don't, you can go edit it in Common App if you need to use a different email. Once you've created the account, we want you to complete the current or most recent school segment on the education section of the Common App tab. it's going to look a lot like this. So once you search for it, you'll find that it populates Newark Charter. If you want, you can just search by our school code, which is 080126. And then, of course, you want to put your date of entry for this senior class now. And this could change from year to year, but of course, this senior class now, the date of entry would be August 2014. That would not be 2013. Actually, I'm sorry, it'd be August 2015. This should be 2015 here, okay? This was a tutorial created a couple of years ago, that the image there. So it'll be your date of entry for current seniors, the class of 2019, would be August 2015. Then if you matched with Mr. Mitchell to write your counselor rec, this is my information here. If you match with Mrs. Halfin, this is her information here. You can enter that when you're adding your school. Then we want you to click on the college search tab and add at least one college to your list. Again, there's a lot of things you can do in Common App that you'll have to do to apply to college, but we want you to do a couple tasks right away to ensure that we can match your Navient and Common Application accounts. So first, again, you went ahead and created an account, then you completed the current or most recent school tab. Now you're going to go ahead and search for a college and add at least one college. For an example here, we use University of Delaware. Once you've added at least one college, you can then click on the My Colleges tab and then the Recommenders and FERPA segment. Then proceed to complete the FERPA release authorization. So this is a segment where it asks students whether or not they want to waive their right to view their letters of recommendation. Now, we encourage you to read all the fine print, but we do ultimately recommend that you do waive your right to access your letters of recommendation. And the reason for that is that some colleges have indicated that they may not take the content of the recommendation as seriously if they know, the college knows, that the recommender knew that the student was not waiving their right to view it. So in other words, if I'm sitting down to write a letter for a student and I know that he or she has not waived the right, which I will see that, and so will teachers, then maybe I won't be as honest in my content. Now, I can tell you that me as a counselor, regardless whether or not you waive it, I'm going to be fully honest and of course, advocate for the student applicant, regardless of whether or not they waive or don't waive it. But some students are under the misconception that if they don't waive their right, that they can just go to the counselor or go to the teacher and say, hey, I want to see my letter. I didn't waive the right. Teachers and counselors still have the right to withhold the letters of recommendation. So most of us will do that. We don't share letters of recommendation easily with students without certain practices being involved for a number of reasons. But ultimately, we want students to waive their right because we want them to have confidence that we're going to say things that are going to be beneficial to them. And that's why we require things like the counselor recommendation guide from students. It's also why teachers require the personal recommendation surveys. So our students are counseled on the front end on which teachers the right ones to ask. If a teacher is going to write something negative, we've counseled them as well to not accept the request for a recommendation. So we've made sure to match students properly with the right recommenders, and we're very confident that the process is going to work out in terms of the depth of our advocacy. Our letters of recommendation from teachers are a point of pride for Newark Charter, and as are the counselor recommendations. So we are not concerned. We do want you to waive your right because we want the colleges to know that you were confident in what was being written about you, that you weren't worried what we were going to write about. Also, if you do not waive your right, which again is your prerogative, if you choose not to waive it, then again, you could ask the teacher or the counselor for it, and typically we're going to say no, because again, we're keeping with our own best practices. But then you might say, okay, well then how can I see it? So some colleges will keep a reservoir, so to speak, or a electronic storage of letters of recommendation. So in order for you to get it from the college, you would have to be admitted to that college, inquire, and they would have to be a school that actually stores the recommendations, and then they could show it to you. But many colleges do not store it. But of course, you'd have to get in first, decide to enroll, then you could ask to see the letter. So just to be careful, most students I work with who decided not to waive the right, many of them came back and said, oops, I wish I had waived the right. I don't want the college to think that I wasn't confident what was going to be said about me. But typically, if a student doesn't waive their right, it's usually a mistake. But again, as far as the the composition of the letter, it doesn't matter to me, but we do want you to waive the right to ensure that the colleges view those letters of recommendation with full confidence as to their content. And again, we take a lot of pride in advocating for students who have worked so hard to get through Newark Charter's curriculum that, you should feel comfortable with what's being written about them. Again, if you don't, it's fully plausible and under your right, 100%, to not waive your right. So number 5, after you've done these things, these are the things that are required to be done to actually match your Common App account in Navient. So once you've created the account, completed the education section, so Common App knows you're at Newark Charter, and then once you've added at least one college, completed the FERPA release authorization, whether you waive it or you don't, once you're done that, now you can waive your Common App account, or you can match your Common App account with your Family Connection Navient account. So you'd log in to Navient. After you're logged in, you want to go to colleges you're applying to, and then enter your Newark Charter email address, which needs to match your email and Common App, and your date of birth, and then click match. So once that's done, now we can actually go ahead and send your documents to colleges. The counselors and the teachers will go through Navient. It'll link up with Common App, and it keeps the process all kind of together for us and for you as well. The next step is to actually tell us where you're applying to college. Now, some of these things will automatically roll over from Common App, but you really have to do it properly in Navient. So the next step is to request transcripts for college. And first, we require it to be done in paper for a number of reasons, but ultimately it's for quality control, and also in case Navient were to be compromised in some fashion, or if the website goes down, we need to be able to know where you're applying to colleges aside from just Navient. So the first step is paper, to fill out a paper request. And this also does make sure that it's an intentional process for the student. We want you to pause and think about where you're applying, as opposed to just adding 5, 10, 15 colleges on a whim. This paper process makes it very intentional, and it should be one piece of paper for every college. The paper itself, which I pulled up here, looks very elaborate. It's very easy to fill out. The reason there's so much text here is so there's a lot of information to help you in case you have questions. So let's just walk through this form here. So make sure to put your name up top. That's key. A lot of students forget their name. Make sure to put your name. And we'll have copies of this at the main office near Mrs. Hesseltine. And you can pick up the copies there. They'll be in green. The paper will be green. You pick them up there, and you also turn them in back there. So you write the full college name or university. So not just DTCC for Del Tech Community College, but Delaware Technical Community College. Give us a full listing. And then down here it notes, if requesting Del Tech, please specify which campus. It's very common for students just to write Del Tech or DTCC, and we don't have the campus. So it's important that you list the full university name or college, including the campus. And then beneath that is the program or major most likely to pursue at the college, so whatever your major is likely to be. Now, this doesn't have to be 100% accurate, but it's important to note that if I get a request for a transcript or if I get several requests from the same student and they're planning to major in English at one college, biology another, chemistry at another, that will be a little flag to us as counselors to say, wait a minute, let's see, what is this student doing? Are they wisely applying to different majors at places, which could be the case. Many students decide to do that. But then we want to make sure, okay, now we know that our letter of recommendation should not just include one type of major only if we can see there's a variety. So we want you to be very clear here in terms of the major or program you might be applying to. Then you have to indicate what is the type of college deadline. These are some common options here: regular decision, early action, rolling, early decision, priority, etc. Now, if your student is, by the time they're applying, if they're checking off these boxes and they don't know what any of these mean, that's an issue, because we've gone over this probably 7 to 10, maybe 15 times in the last 3 years, but it happens. Sometimes it's just lingo that's easy to forget, but you got to get it right, because this is really vital, the type of deadline you're using. So if you're curious about this, you can go to the back page. Let me just forward down there. we have an admissions definitions glossary to assist you with these different types of deadlines. But again, when you're actually filling it out, you want to check off the deadline and then put the official deadline date. This is not the date that you prefer it to be done by because you want it to be done earlier because it's important to you. We understand that, but this has to be a legitimate deadline date as we have to make sure we prioritize by students' deadlines. Then the question is, how are you applying to the college? Through what method? So for example, Common App or the college's own application. Some schools don't use Common App. You just go right to the website like Del Tech or WilmU. And then there could be other options. So if the school uses the Coalition application, so that's a new, relatively new competitor to Common App, you would check off other and just write Coalition app. And then down here it says, did you already submit this request in Naviance? Because it is required to do the request on paper and also Naviance. So you have to answer that question. And then down here you have to note that you understand it's your responsibility, not Newark Charter, to send your official SAT or ACT scores. And the question is which counselor is writing your letter of recommendation if it's required, and you can check off the name there, and then you want to sign it and date it, etc. Now again, down here it shows some popular college deadlines and the corresponding due date for transfer requests. We do want these requests turned in a month prior to the deadline. There will be leeway within reason if necessary. It happens quite a bit, but we want it to be reasonable. What we don't want is a student who's applying for a college that's with an application of November 1, and we find out about that deadline 5 days in advance, or 6 days, or 7 days, or 1 day in advance. That's just not going to work because we have to prioritize by deadlines. So if you're applying to a college deadline that's November 1, ideally we should know about it by October 1st. So please keep this in mind. And if the timeline is out of whack so much, then it's absolutely plausible or possible that we could decline to complete it in that time frame because we have so many others in front of you, and we can't hurt another student's application because you didn't adhere to preferred deadlines. So, and these dates apply to both the submission of the paper request and on Navient. So what we suggest is that students complete this paper form at the same time as they're doing the electronic requests. So again, you're doing this on paper and electronically. You might as well do it at the same time. So take home a stack of green forms and then go ahead, complete the forms while you're also requesting in Naviance. So again, this was the college transfer request form. Not sure why it's showing absence request form. It's certainly not an absence request form. This is the college transfer request form. And so as you're completing that, or when you're finished with that, ideally in the same sitting, that's when you also want to request transcripts in Naviance. So again, we show some of the similar guidelines here, and then the process for actually requesting transcripts in Naviance is described at this same page for college app procedures. Once you're logged into Naviance, students should click on the colleges tab and then the colleges I'm applying to link. Then you can click on the college or the request transcripts, the circular button. It'll be a red color there. And then you want to go ahead and add the colleges. For each request, you must indicate the type of deadline you are using, which again, that was on the paper form. It's important to note the system will drop, the drop-down menu will probably default to regular decision, but if you're applying to early action, early decision, etc., you have to indicate it here on the drop-down menu. Make sure to do your research to ensure that you're actually selecting a real deadline option that truly exists. So for example, no student should be putting down early decision for the University of Delaware because the University of Delaware does not have early decision, okay? They have one deadline traditionally the last few years. It's been January 15th, and that is regular decision. Now there's a little bit more about that later, but you also need to indicate the method you will use to apply to the college. Again, this was on those forms, but you want to make sure that we know through what system you're using. So for example, if you're applying through Common App, you want to indicate that. If you're applying through the Coalition app or any other non-Common App system, you'll be selecting directly to the institution. Also, please note that at this point you're requesting, if it's the beginning of your senior year, these are requesting initial transcripts. Okay, so it'll ask you to specify whether or not you are requesting an initial, mid-year, or final transcript. This is an initial transcript. So this is just a a screenshot of what the form looks like online. So you'll enter the college you're applying to, make sure you pick the right college. Then you select the type of deadline you're using, so early decision, regular decision, early action, etc. And then you're indicating the deadline for your application. No, I'll submit my application. That piece there is to show through what method you're applying. So where I noted up above, whether it's Common App, non-Common App, directly to the institution, etc. That's where you indicate that. And then you click the add and request transcript. After you've added as many colleges as you're adding at that time, you don't have to add them all at once. We certainly encourage you to do it in one fell swoop, filling out the forms and online. But you may add some periodically. Just make sure to be consistent with the paper and online. But after you've added them, if you want to go back and edit, you can see your list of schools you're applying to. You can click on the edit button, and it will allow you to change the deadline you're using to apply, like early action. It will allow you to change the submission type, so Common App or non-Common App, etc. So that's ultimately the end of these key 5 steps for applying to college from Newark Charter. Now you'll notice there's a very key piece missing here, which is the financial aid application. And another piece that you could argue is missing is, well, how do we actually apply to colleges? This is just how you tell Newark Charter you're applying. Now, how do you apply? Well, of course, that comes through creating the Common App account and working through the application and the essays, which we work on with students. But these are the procedural pieces that we've covered here that often confound parents who don't know about them, or maybe their parents haven't translated it for them. So that's why we're creating this video, to help you understand the process. Now, there's some out there who might say, wow, this is so hard. You'd think that technology would make applying to colleges easier. Technology does make applying to colleges much easier. We're not mailing things out. All the transcripts are submitted electronically. We can track them. We can ensure they've been received, etc. This process, if we didn't have the paper form, would be all electronic. And quite frankly, for some students, could take 10 minutes to request all of their transcripts. So this looks very involved, but we just try to be very clear with details. And then we add the paper piece to ensure students are being very intentional and smart about the process. And we have the paper piece in case Navient were to go down, and we don't have any control over that since it's a corporation. So we want to make sure that we have the paper sheets just in case if we had to, and also to ensure students are being really smart about this. So those are the college application procedures. And then the other piece that's missing here is the financial aid side of things. And that's why we'll host multiple financial aid nights this year, including a FAFSA completion night where you can actually, parents and students, they should both be there, can come and actually complete the FAFSA on site with some help from folks at Stand By Me. Most families can complete it without coming into a FAFSA completion night, but if it helps you feel more confident that they'll be there to help you, you can certainly come to one of those nights that'll be published in our newsletters. We'll also send direct emails out to parents, but feel free to attend those nights if you'd like. There's also the general factor here that after October 1st is when the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, goes live. So if students want to receive any kind of need-based aid, all students should fill out the FAFSA with a parent after October 1. You do not want to do it before October 1 because they're not going to publish it for the year you're attending college yet until after October 1. But once October 1 hits, you should be filling out the FAFSA for the 2019-2020 school year, because again, current seniors, class of 2019, will be applying to college to attend in the fall of 2019, and that school year will be the 2019-2020 school year. So after October 1st is when families should be filling out the free application for federal student aid, also known as the FAFSA, and you'll be filling that out and sending it to all the colleges you're applying to. Now, in addition to the FAFSA, there's also the CSS profile, or now it's just known as the profile. So lots of private colleges, and I'll give a local example. University of Pennsylvania is obviously a well-known private college in Philadelphia. University of Pennsylvania, along with dozens of other private colleges, and some public, but few and far between, but mostly private, are going to require the FAFSA and also the profile. So 2 financial documentation pieces. The profile will dig a little bit deeper, look at some other assets, but they're just trying to get a full view of the parent's financial contribution potential. And so, again, students applying to University of Delaware, for example, that's public school, they're going to be filling out the FAFSA after October 1 as soon as possible. You should not be waiting for tax returns because it's based upon the prior year. So you shouldn't be waiting for anything. So virtually 100% or almost students already have, or their parents already have a documentation necessary to complete the FAFSA after October 1. And you should also plan to complete the profile as soon as possible if you're applying to any colleges that require it. There's a lot more information about financial aid that can be covered, but again, I wanted this just to be an overview. So we encourage you to attend those financial aid nights or to contact me if you have any questions about the financial aid piece.